Monster upset in Athens, Georgia, where number 3, Georgia, is hosting unranked South Carolina. Under 2 minutes left, game tied at 10, Jake Fromm gets intercepted by Israel Ukwamu. 53 yards to the house. First interception of the season, his first career pick 6 thrown by Jake Fromm. So South Carolina up 17-10 at halftime. Fourth quarter we go. Jake Fromm looking for his guy, and he's intercepted again by Mukwamu. Second of the game. Georgia's third turnover of the game, all from Fromm. He also fumbled the football in this game. Late fourth quarter we go. Just over 6 minutes to play. Gamecocks in front, 17-10. UGA on their own 4-yard line. DeAndre Swift up the middle for 9 yards. Some breathing room there. Same drive. Fromm to Dominic Blaylock, 16 yards and a first down. So the Dogs are marching. Later in the drive, 4th and 6. Jake Fromm looking to tie this baby up. Incomplete. Is South Carolina going to win it here? The flags are flying, though. Defensive holding. We get another shot. Next play, Jake Fromm doesn't miss on this one. Demetris Robertson, 6 yards and a touchdown, and we are knotted at 17. What a catch. What a big-time play from Georgia, but they get lucky on a penalty. Now 45 seconds left. Will Muschamp runs his kicker out there for a 57-yard kick, and it's not even close. He was going for the win. Instead, we're going overtime. In OT, Fromm. Pass, tip, intercepted by guess who again? Mukwamu. 3 INTs in this game for Mukwamu. Have yourself a day, kid. Those kids not having themselves a day. 4 turnovers from Fromm. 3 interceptions, 1 fumble lost, as I mentioned. So ensuing SC possession. Parker White from 33 yards out. He missed it. First miss inside 50 for him this season. Ryan Hilinski banged up in this game. Can't believe it. Golly gee Willikers. We go to double OT. Georgia with a chance to tie it. Rodrigo Blankenship. No! And South Carolina upsets third-ranked Georgia 20-17 in double overtime. Ryan Hilinski on the sideline. Epic reaction. The people watching there in Athens cannot believe it. And neither can we. Because I think if you had told me that Georgia was going to get upset on this Saturday against South Carolina, I would have said, you're crazy. You're absolutely crazy. South Carolina earning its first win against an AP top 5 team since 2013. Look, Georgia's shot at making the college football playoff, not over. It's not over. They got time. But the big takeaway here is they did not look like a playoff team. 4 turnovers in this game. This is like another SEC team. It didn't look like Georgia. It didn't look like the number 3 team in the nation. They lose in double overtime to unranked South Carolina. Will Muschamp played at Georgia, and he played the Bulldogs on this day. Wow. Wow is all I can say. We're sitting here watching this. BMAC here alongside Tom Fornelli, CBS Sports college football analyst. Tom Fornelli predicted this, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. He had South Carolina to cover, and not only did they cover, they won the game. Tom, I want to go to you first here to get your reaction to what you saw there in Athens.
Yeah, you know, the beginning of this season had been so chalky that you knew something like this was going to happen at some point, but I did not think it was going to be this game. I thought Georgia was probably going to coast today, although, like you said, I did take South Carolina to cover, but this really came out of nowhere, and this was more, I feel like, all credit to South Carolina for pulling off the win. This was a situation where Georgia shot itself in the foot. They turned the ball over 4 times. You mentioned Jake Fromm, that pick 6 he threw in the first half. That was his first interception on the season, but he made up for lost time. He finished the day with 3, although I'm only putting 2 of them on him. The one in overtime was not his fault. He hit his receiver in the hands. That should have been caught. But this is still a situation where Georgia had the 4 turnovers, And if you look, the only points South Carolina got off of those turnovers was the pick six. They didn't convert the other ones into points. This was just a situation where Georgia it kept itself from putting points on the board. It put itself in a position it should have never been in. It outplayed South Carolina in pretty much every facet of this game. If you go up and down the box score, it's hard to find a spot where South Carolina played better than the Bulldogs. And like you said, they didn't look like a playoff team. And if we think back to a few weeks ago, when Georgia beat Notre Dame in Athens, the prevailing story coming out of that game was how everybody was impressed with Notre Dame because they didn't think that Notre Dame was going to be able to hang with Georgia, and they thought it was an impressive performance. Now you're kind of looking back on that and saying, maybe it really wasn't Notre Dame. Maybe this is just a Georgia team that we kind of had higher expectations for than probably should have, and they haven't really been able to live up to that billing because this is not a game they should have lost. And no, it doesn't eliminate them from the playoff consideration. If they win out and win the SEC, I would bet that they're getting in, but it does make things a lot more difficult, and it does add a blemish to the resume so that if we get into a situation where we're nitpicking for, between Georgia and somebody else for that fourth spot, a loss to South Carolina is not going to look good on the resume at the end of the year because I don't think this is the game that turns the Gamecocks season around. I still think they're going to be going as a slightly above average team for the rest of the season. So this one could haunt them for a while.
What does this mean for Georgia?
Right now, their chances of getting into the playoffs extremely slim. And not just as far as playoff aspirations, they still got a difficult schedule left to be played. I mean, you got Kentucky, then you got Florida, you got Mizzou, but also you have Auburn and Texas A&M, right? And of course, the rival Georgia Tech at the end of the season. So based on what we know as of today, they have 3 top 25 opponents left to be played on their schedule. They have to travel to Auburn. Of course, you get Florida and Jacksonville, and you get A&M towards the end of November at home. Those are difficult ball games to play, especially if you already have a loss on your schedule. To a team like South Carolina, who was below 500 before today's ball game, had questions, inconsistent play at the quarterback position. They had a questionable defense. All of that was erased today based on how well their defense played. And let's keep it real. Georgia has more talent than South Carolina. But when you continue to play sloppy, dirty football, create turnovers for the opposing team to benefit from, you will put yourself in a very, very difficult situation to ultimately lose. And that's what we saw today. So as far as playoff aspirations, I think the bigger question for me is, can Georgia still win the East?
How would you answer that? How would you answer your own question?
I'll say they still have a shot because they still control their own destiny, and they will need some help, right? Yep. Let's keep it real. You got Florida who playing LSU tonight. Then they will play Florida in 2 weeks, and hopefully Florida can have a blemish on their schedule before that matchup in Jacksonville. But I think a more realistic thing for me right now for Georgia is winning the East outside of playoffs, because we felt like before today's ball game, they were one of the 4 best teams in the country. And we felt like they would control their own destiny, and we felt like the only team that potentially could give them a blemish would be Florida. No one saw South Carolina.
Nobody.
No one saw this happening, especially at home. So for me, playoffs, don't worry about the playoffs right now, you Jay fans. Better worry about trying to win your division.
Yeah, the first college football playoff rankings will be released in November 5th. So we got some time.
A lot of time.
Now in between. And we mentioned they do play Florida a couple days before those rankings are released. Tom, we brought something up as we watched this game in terms of the coaching. Will Muschamp, of course, made some questionable decisions. We also saw Kirby Smart make some questionable decisions, some head-scratching timeouts. It was another, unfortunately, Kirby not so smart in some situations here.
Yeah, I mean, listen, this loss is on the players, but Kirby Smart didn't do his team a lot of favors, particularly late in the game. There was the decision to go for the Hail Mary at the end of regulation when they could have attempted a field goal. And while Rodrigo Blankenship missed the field goal in overtime and the one before overtime was much longer, he's still a kicker that has shown throughout his career at Georgia that he's capable of making big kicks. So I feel like that was a situation where you should have given your kicker a chance, because that's a higher percentage chance than Jake Fromm being able to throw a Hail Mary on that final play. And then this is just, if I'm a Georgia fan, I'm a little concerned because this is a running theme with Kirby Smart in big games. We've seen it in the SEC championship against Alabama when he's calling fake punts and his team's got a lead. And that kind of turned the momentum of the game around, cost Georgia the SEC title game. We see this happening. Like you mentioned, the timeout usage. It would have been really nice to have a few extra timeouts there in the final minute, wouldn't it? But they didn't have them. And this is one of those things where it's enough to get the talent and it's enough to develop the talent. But when it comes to game day decisions, Kirby Smart's been leaving something left to be desired for Georgia fans. And, this is something that you would hope in year 3 and 4, maybe he's figured out. And it was something that I thought they had figured out going into the season. But today, man, it's not a great look for anybody involved with Georgia right now. And forget, the playoff, the division. The fact of the matter is, if Georgia keeps playing like it did this week, none of that's going to matter because they're going to lose once or twice more at least.
A shocking loss indeed at home for Georgia between the hedges, and South Carolina rolls into town and kicks the Dogs right down in double overtime, earning their first win against an AP top 5 since 2013. Gamecocks 20, Dogs 17 in double overtime. Tom Fornelli, Bryant McFadden break it down here on CBS Sports HQ. Thank you, man. Oklahoma will most certainly move up in the rankings. Well, that's because number 3 Georgia goes down, and I know that you got wind of that even there in Dallas, an upset in Athens. Your reaction to Georgia losing to South Carolina and what this means going forward for the Bulldogs?
Well, it's pretty easy for me. Georgia has to win out to have any hope, and then they may not have any. This is a crippling loss for Georgia. At home to a team that was a pedestrian 2-3 coming into the game. A lot of it self-inflicted. 3 interceptions by Jake Fromm. I think Rodrigo Blankenship had a field goal blocked. And with everything we heard in the offseason, all the hype about Georgia, about this was Jake Fromm's year, DeAndre Swift, that defense was fantastic. They just laid an egg. And this is a bad loss for Georgia. It's not going to look good to the committee. And they have to win the SEC title and hope to get in the top 4. Yes, the SEC champion is going to get into the top 4. But if you watch Georgia today, you don't think that Georgia is going to win the SEC. So this is a bad loss for Georgia and, frankly, the SEC.
Yeah, Dennis, they did not look like a playoff team. 4 turnovers as they lose to South Carolina at home, and the Gamecocks are in their first win against an AP top 5 since 2013. Dennis, great job as always joining us there from the Cotton Bowl, where Oklahoma prevails over Texas in the Red River rivalry.